Hello and welcome to mytrainerfitness.com, where we focus on energizing, engaging, and empowering people to live their best fit life. I'm Devani.
And I'm Leora. Thom King has always struggled with his weight before adopting a ketogenic lifestyle. In his book, Guy Gone Keto, Thom details how perseverance and a high-fat, low-carb diet enabled him to drop 5 waist sizes in a single year. Thom's essential wellness program includes tips for reading and understanding food labels, supportive techniques to make you feel capable and empowered, as well as tasty recipes and easy-to-follow meal plans that will keep you fit and healthy for life. Thom King is also a serial entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Steviva brands after the natural sweetener Stevia. He also owns Icon Foods. Thom's company is one of the largest importers. Steviva is one of the largest importers, manufacturers, and distributors of natural sweeteners, and he's created an entirely new company and line of food products around his Guy Gone Keto brand, which I'm sure our fitness audience will love. A self-described biohacker, Thom has made it his life's work to study food science, and he's on a mission to help people eat healthier, avoid harmful sugars, and maintain diet and exercise habits that defeat metabolic disease, which Thom calls diabesity. Welcome, Thom King.
Thank you so much. That was an excellent introduction. I might have to steal some of that.
Absolutely. Well, and totally. For a minute there, I stumbled on because I had written it as Steviva is now called Icon Foods, and then I second guessed myself in midstream because I didn't actually know if you changed the name of Steviva to Icon or if you have both companies still functioning.
So yeah, so Steviva brands, that's our retail line. So we're distributed through 2,500 stores or more across the U.S., our line of sweeteners. And I started Steviva as a consumer brand in the hopes of being able to build consumer brand equity and then be able to parlay that into an ingredient company. So that pretty much happened. And so Steviva brands was divided into Steviva brands and then Steviva ingredients. And what we found is we were getting too pigeonholed in the stevia category when stevia is probably one of the least things we sell. We sell basically sweetening systems. So we did a lot of market research on, where we wanted to be, and we wanted to expand as an ingredient company. So that's when we changed the name, or actually started another company called Icon Foods, and Icon Foods is focused on sweeteners, sweetening systems, and now we're branching into inclusions like chocolate chips, white chocolate chips, sprinkles, things that are used in low carb or ketogenic ice creams, bars, cookies, because we found a great opening for us there, because there really isn't any really good commercial quality chocolate chips. So we're branching more into those types of categories.
Wow, that's awesome. Fantastic. Yeah. And I'm so glad to hear that. There are so many people who we love hearing that as well. And we're going to dive into more of that story. I just wanted to share with the My Trainer Fitness audience that we also had a wonderful interview with you for the I Create Daily brand podcast, which we also own and run. And so for anyone who wants to learn more about Thom's entrepreneurial journey, his creator journey, and how he got started with Steviva brands in general, we will link to that podcast. But for now, so we had a conversation off air for a minute there about how we're vegetarians, and yet many in our audience are not. Yeah. So we're really glad to have you as a keto guy, Guy Gone Keto, to share a little bit about your story. That I think you began the ketogenic journey as a part of your weight loss journey, right?
Yeah, it was partly weight loss. I mean, I was carrying an extra 35 pounds, which is pretty unhealthy. But there were other factors too, like brain fog, and my blood pressure, was super high. So there was a lot of sort of dis-ease, if you will, that I wanted to deal with, inflammation, and I think all of it is interrelated. So as I moved into keto, I found that my brain function just really, really increased quite a bit, because your brain can actually function either on glucose or ketones, and it functions more efficiently on ketones. So like once you get past that induction phase, or like the keto flu, some people call it, it's pretty much like somebody just turned the lights on, and you're like, whoa, this is what I've been missing. So, you'll be using a lot less stimulants like coffee and tea. And that's what worked for me. But I do get asked a lot, because I think that there's a little bit of misunderstanding about the ketogenic diet. Like, oh, you guys just eat bacon and cheese and that's it. And that's way, way far from reality. I think if you just eat bacon and cheese, that's a great way to invite in a cardiac event, so if you will, or some issues with your colon, because you balance is, I think, key. And I think that you can really sum up like the ketogenic diet pretty easily, and it's 70% fat, 20% protein, 10% vegetables, 10% carbohydrates, but those carbohydrates come in the form of like cruciferous vegetables. So if it basically grows underground, like carrots, potatoes, you're not going to eat it because it's going to be high glycemic. So the big question is, can you do ketogenic and be a vegan or a vegetarian? I get that a lot.
Yeah.
And of course you can.
You can?
Really?
And in fact, I'll prove it. So I will do 90 days vegan keto starting in February.
Wow.
Awesome.
Okay.
I will track the data. I will post everything that I'm eating, and we'll see how it works. But I'm very confident that it'll work out.
I'm super curious about that, because we are definitely interested in the boosting brain function side.
Sure.
And I know you drink bulletproof coffee. Leora drinks bulletproof coffee.
Nice.
I drink the just normal black coffee. But doing other things to like cut out sugars, we're definitely all about the health stuff. But I would definitely be interested in reading your experiments of doing the keto as a vegan or vegetarian, however you do that, because I don't know a lot about it, so I don't really talk about like paleo or keto or anything, but like you were saying, a lot of what I've heard is like, well, that just looks like a lot of meat, so that doesn't seem like anything I could do ever, because I don't eat that.
And the other caveat for us as vegetarians is that we're also allergic to soy. So if does your journey, like in February, your 90-day vegan keto experiment, will that include soy?
I think it's likely that it will not include any soy whatsoever. Soy can be converted in your body into a phytoestrogen, which men don't really want to have, and probably women don't want to have it either, because an overabundance of estrogen can throw your system off. But men definitely not, and particularly middle-aged men like myself. As you grow older, you're going to be in a constant fight to keep testosterone levels up. And when those drop, you're going to lose muscle mass, and focus, drive. So, those are pretty critical things to keep going. One thing I will note is that when you see people posting to Instagram and Pinterest, and they're keto-centric, and you see these big, huge plates of meat and cheese, I'm not sure that if you eat too much protein, on a ketogenic diet, it will actually throw you out of ketosis. So your body if you eat too much protein, your body will store that in form of glycogen in your muscles. So it converts actually to a glucose derivative. So don't eat too much protein. So protein is a small segment of the ketogenic diet. Fat is the primary source of energy, and there is a lot of plant-based fat. Nut butters, I eat a ton of nut butter. And one thing that I really missed is hummus, because I love dipping vegetables in hummus. But chickpeas have a lot of carbs. And they're not part of that ketogenic diet. So I actually made hummus with sprouted almonds. So it's basically almonds that I soak for a few days, get them to sprout. And then I put them in a blender along with some olive oil, some nutritional yeast, and cumin, lemon juice, and a ton of olive oil. And it's amazing. So like I've given it to coworkers who are vegans, and I'm like, hey, what do you think of this hummus? And they're like, oh, that's amazing hummus. And never once did they know that I didn't use chickpeas in it. Wow. So there's tons of options like avocados. I'm not really worried about it at all. I think I will get plenty of fat and definitely plenty of protein. And I do like to eat leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower and kale and a variety of different lettuces. And I mean, I think it's going to be pretty easy doing vegan keto.
Well, so,
that's really good to hear.
Yeah, is that going to be your next book?
I have another book that's about 3/4 of the way finished, but it's not a diet book or a lifestyle book for that matter. It's sort of, it's like a daily journal where like I break down quotes from like Yoda and various other characters and then really drill into it, like what it means to me, on sort of a more motivational level. Like, what does Yoda mean by saying that, there's no try, only do. Yes. So it's a fun book. And so that one I will publish in 2019. And then I have another book that I'm starting that I'll get out in 2020. And it's going to be kind of the same format, except it's going to use all rock and roll quotes. So, I love that. To inspire. So I have those. Yeah. So the book about vegan keto, it would be more of a diet book, I think. And I kind of I don't really believe in diets. I only believe in lifestyle change. And I think I'd rather just give that information out in blog posts and newsletters and, and help people, see that vegan keto is pretty easy to do and, and healthy. Because I mean, a lot of vegans that I know eat really bad food, like chips and, oh, these are vegan. I'm like, that's a corn chip and that's going to send your blood sugar level through the roof. So when I look at like how a lot of vegans eat, and they do eat a lot of packaged food too, which is, oh, these are vegan. So I think that just because you're vegan or a vegetarian, it doesn't mean you're going to be any healthier than somebody who practices keto, and vice versa. It's going to be how you practice it. If it's in a box or a bag or a can, don't eat it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so important because I think, in fact, overdoing the soy is probably, as vegetarians and part of the time vegans, is probably why it is that several in my family, Devani, and plus her brother to some extent, have developed anywhere from mild to severe reactions to soy. And it's not that we did a lot of packaged foods. For the kids growing up, they, would like some of the soy, sausage and that sort of thing growing up. And so we had that like on a weekend kind of treat. But
the build up over
time, and also the soy, because I used to drink soy milk as well. Right. And little did we know that. So what I think a lot of people don't know, and I know that you as a biohacker and a science like research paper geek, you love to maybe a little bit more about this, even though it's not exactly our topic for today. If it would be interesting to know. The thing that baffles me, one is, why is it that so many supplements for men contain soy? It just doesn't make sense that even bodybuilding.com, which is like probably the top fitness physique site on the internet, one of their primary protein powders and supplements contain soy. So it just doesn't, it's like incongruent. It doesn't quite make sense. And the other is, from what I understand from our naturopath, While soy is high in protein and would seem like a good clean protein, it isn't one easily assimilated in the body. So are there any things that you've read on either of those counts that you would care to speak to?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, part of my job is to do reformulation. So like I'll reformulate powdered drink mixes as well as RTDs, ready to drink beverages. So I've done a lot in the protein drink category. Soy is cheap. The bioavailability of it, meaning how much your body's going to really absorb, I think is still sort of up in the air. I think that there's other sources of protein that can come close to come close to soy, and even like a combination of different types of plant-based proteins like pea protein or rice protein, or any of the nut proteins. One that I've used a lot in ice cream mixes is almond protein. It has some pretty decent bioavailability. And also, I think that there's a lot of different collagens that are now being developed that are non-bovine based or non-animal based, that I think can definitely boost protein levels. I think the biggest question, I mean, that's about protein. And I mean, you've even got like watermelon seed protein. I mean, there's so many different varieties of proteins out there. As far as the efficacy of these particular proteins go, I'm not really sure. I mean, I've had some experience with pea protein that has been pretty good. It's hard to mask, has some off notes and some grittiness. But I mean, I don't think that, I think that soy is popular because it's cheap. And it also is popular because it shows up as a good solid protein, but it's also one of the most genetically modified crops out there. So I think that the science is still debating whether GMO is actually affects you or not. But I would lean into that it probably does. Like once you start genetically modifying something to a particular point that your body may not recognize it. But I'd say even larger is allergens. Like are you getting an allergic reaction from it? And a lot of times that can be from the massive amounts of genetic, modification that's gone on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So what kind of, you mentioned non-animal protein, collagen. Yeah. What are some examples of that?
I don't have like a ton of examples right now. There's a product called Gelita that I'm starting to work with a little bit. That's a plant-based collagen protein, but I haven't really put a ton of work into it yet to see how effective it is. And I know this might sound peculiar, but if I'm creating some sort of a formula, I'll test it on myself first to see what kind of effect that I'm getting. So like if I'm doing a post-workout, I'll do a workout and maybe for 5 to 7 days, I'll use some of the products that I'm creating. And even if it's for a customer, like if a customer wants to retool their current formula, I'll end up using it for a while to see how it affects me, how it affects my microbiome, affects my energy levels. So that was sort of a circuitous way of getting to the point of, do I have enough data collected on the plant-based collagen? No. Will I? Yes. Probably within the next 90 days, I'll move it into the lab and start doing a lot of work with it.
Well, good. I'll be excited to hear that because as a vegetarian and also as a baby boomer, 59, I know and see about the importance of things like bone broth for collagen. You can definitely tell, the skin elasticity and all those things that happen with age. So it's like, what can I do, that may be vegetarian friendly? So that would be good to know. And I'm sure there are some in our audience who would like to know that as well.
Yeah, and I also think that just, out of being good stewards of the planet, I think that it's a good idea to, lessen the amount of animal proteins that we consume, because it's not super efficient. You know, and then on the other side of the coin, you know, deep-seated carnivores will tell you that, you know, a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle has more of an impact on the planet because you're using, you know, more space to create, you know, or to grow crops, and that, you know, it's a bad use of water. I would have to say that I lean more into plant-based and supporting plant-based than the carnivore diet, which I've seen some people do, and it sort of turns my stomach a little bit. It's like just meat alone. It sounds really unhealthy.
Yeah, it would get boring pretty quickly. It definitely wouldn't work for me. But, you know, I mean, really, and this is something I'm sure you've, and this is kind of what makes research a little bit hard, even scientific studies, and that is that every body is different. And so, you know, what one body might need more of, the next body, it's actually the opposite, which is why there is no one diet for everyone. And really, we do have to use our own judgment, intuition, and observation, like you spend a lot of time doing, biohacking our own, you know, biology, essentially.
Yeah, I'm 100%. And I mean, just because my book is entitled Guy Gone Keto, I don't believe that keto is a diet that's for everybody. That's something that you know, you will have to decide on your own. And so, I mean, if you read the book is more about giving you the tools to be able to make a lifestyle change than it is actual, you know, keto. It does have keto recipes in it. You know, and meal plans, but it's not the majority of the book. The majority of the book talks about how to make a lifestyle shift, you know, the discipline that it takes, the routines, you know, that are required to be successful with it.
Right, definitely. And so I'm looking at your Guy Gone Keto product line, which in our previous conversation with the I Create Daily podcast, you told us a little bit about how that came about, and, you know, you were eating some of your favorite foods, but now that you're conscious about the sugar you're consuming and being more ketogenic and healthy, it's like, well, what is it that I'm putting on my hamburger or my burger or my meat or a steak?
Can't just have ketchup anymore.
and just, it is baffling and shocking, really, to realize how much sugar is hidden in these seemingly, you know, innocuous sauces. Yeah.
Like you could have a salad and it could be completely unhealthy just because you put a bucket full of dressing
that actually had sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and a lot of additives. And so you created this line. Your keto, your ketchup, for instance, has stevia as sweetener instead of sugar, and it even has MCT oil, medium chain triglycerides. So, you know, tell us a little bit about your adding these things to your condiments and how it enhances them, and for those who consume them.
Well, if you ate the condiments alone, it's not gonna be keto friendly all the way. Like, I mean, it does contain tomatoes, and tomatoes have carbs in it. But I mean, I was very sort of intentional about every component that went into it. You know, as the sweetener, we're using a compound called allulose, and allulose is actually a enzymatically treated fructose molecule. So think fermentation, think wine, think cheese, because cheese is really, you know, a enzymatically treated dairy, and wine is an enzymatically treated grape juice. So think of fermentation. So there's an enzyme or bacteria that's added to a fructose substrate, and it modifies the fructose enough where your body is unable to metabolize it as a sugar. So it just passes through your system. When we do that, it reduces the level of sweetness down to 70%. So then we added the stevia and the monk fruit to it. And the beauty of allulose is that allulose will actually lower your blood sugar slightly and raise your ketone levels slightly. And there's really cool science behind that. The stevia and the monk fruit don't really, you know, they're benign and they don't have any effect on blood sugar levels. And the MCT oil, I mean, we chose to use the MCT oil instead of like an olive oil or sunflower oil, because it's a medium chain triglyceride. It is immediately metabolized in your liver and put out as ketones. So I don't think there's enough in there to really move the needle, but there's enough in there to keep you, to keep you in ketosis. So yeah, every ingredient, was well thought out, and, it's all natural.
Yeah, definitely. And, and it's happy news for those who want to try and, still enjoy some of their favorite foods, which, for the most part, when you think about it, whether it's hot dogs, hamburgers, or, a teriyaki, it's the sauce that makes it. Barbecue, same thing. So yeah, that's great. And I see that you guys sell it on Amazon as well as from your website.
Yeah, so we just got on Amazon, which is fun. Our sales are doing really well, and the sales on the website are doing surprisingly well, and we have a lot of cool swag on there too. So, they can get a copy of my autographed book, and it's fun.
Yeah, definitely. We'll look forward to linking to all of that as well. So, what do you have any other things to share relative to your plans for? So you've already talked about the food and additional products that you're going to be creating, the chocolate chips. And did we talk about that in this?
We talked about that in the other.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So tell us about the products to come. And speaking of that, like so often chocolate, once you get allergic to something, so for us soy, and you can't consume soy, you start to discover how it's in everything.
Right.
And especially chocolate chips, they use soy lecithin.
Yes.
And sunflower lecithin is becoming increasingly more used because becoming recognized that soy is an allergen. So is that, what are you going to be using for your chocolate chips?
Well, we already have the chocolate chips, so we sell them through Icon Foods. We sell them to companies that make protein bars, nut butters, and ice creams, and cookies. So, we've already been actively selling them, and we're just wrapping up the packaging for Guy Gone Keto. And the ingredients in our chocolate chips are pretty simple. So it's basically cocoa butter, erythritol, stevia, and sunflower lecithin. That's it.
That sounds wonderful. We were just looking at, we were making our own cocoa using just dark chocolate powder.
Yeah.
Coconut sugar.
Coconut sugar, or else honey or maple syrup, depending on which. And so we don't. We haven't done as much stevia. We need to get into it. I know my sister-in-law was growing it. We've talked about growing it. So speaking of that, we also, by the way, like you being serial entrepreneurs, we have a gardening website and a gardening audience. So tell us.
I love it.
So tell us about growing, like where are you sourcing your stevia from? Do you get it still from South America, or do you have any growers in the U.S.?
We don't have growers in the U.S. The growing zones in the U.S. don't really lend themselves to being able to produce high quality stevia, unfortunately, and the cost of land is too expensive. Some of the leaves are sourced from South America. A lot of our leaves are sourced from China, which, some people have issues with that, like, oh no, it's going to have lead, but we third-party test all of our raw ingredients that come to us. So they're tested for pesticides, they're tested for non-GMO protein indicators, and they are also tested for heavy metals. So anything and everything that comes into our facility is fully tested. And if you are buying product from a company and you have any question about quality, you should be able to email them directly and ask them for what's called a certificate of analysis, which will show you exactly where it came in as far as heavy metals and pesticides and petrochemicals as well. So I encourage anybody who buys supplements, particularly supplements or any type of product, like sweeteners or whatever, to go right to the company and ask for a certificate of analysis and ask for a third party certificate of analysis, so that it came from an unbiased third party who is going to give you the straight scoop on what you're putting in your body.
That's excellent.
Such a good point, especially with the supplement.
The supplement industry is rife with fraud. And I'm a person who is obviously interested in supplements. I do take some supplements. Quite honestly, most of the supplements I take, I do intravenously. So I'll just get an IV of a variety of different compounds. And there's very few supplements that I will just buy like over the counter. I'm super picky about it. I really if I'm buying a supplement from a company, then I do demand to see, to see their certificates of analysis to make sure that the compounds that I'm buying are exactly what they say they are.
Why do you choose to take it intravenously? Now, that's a little bit of a, a little bit of a glutton for punishment to do, to do that to yourself.
You're not the first person who said that. I get that a lot. And so the thing is with vitamins, like some are water soluble, some are fat soluble. I mean, the water soluble ones, your B vitamins and stuff, those, your body, having them make it through your digestive system is like super tough. Like particularly with probiotics, like if you take a probiotic and it says that it's got 5 billion CFU in it, by the time it gets through your stomach, less than 1/10% of those bacteria are going to be intact. So hardly anything makes it through your digestive system. I mean, imagine this big pool of hydrochloric acid. Nothing ever makes it through. It's the digestive system. It gets digested. But if you are going to take like a probiotic, which I fully support, I think gut health is one of your most important things that you can do. Take it with inulin, and that can be easily sourced from, online. Make sure you get a certificate of analysis, but take inulin with your probiotic, and that small percentage of friendly bacteria that makes it through your digestive system, at least will have something to eat. And then when they join the other bacteria in your village, they'll be well fed too. So feed your village lots of good tasty fiber.
Well, that's interesting. We've talked a lot about how we're really looking forward to the approaching medicine, or like access to tests, like home tests, whether it's selective blood tests, what have you,
right,
that tell us what nutrients we need, what we're missing in a given day, because that changes so that, so often we're taking and spending all this money on supplements that basically just end up with, getting flushed down the toilet, so to speak,
right,
or ineffective, as you described in the biome.
Sure.
The gut biome. So do you know of anything like that is already, out there, or have you heard anything about that coming?
No, I mean, they could do encapsulation, but encapsulation will even break down in your stomach. And I think really the unless you're taking herbs, like various types of herbs, I think are pretty effective. If you're fighting off like sort of a metabolic imbalance, like I've taken berberine, which is referred to as the poor man's metformin. But berberine, like taking herbs and stuff, I think that those can be pretty effective. But once it's broken down into like compounds like vitamins and amino acids, it has a super hard time making it through your digestive system. You can give it a shot, but you're just going to have super expensive pee. That's why I do things intravenously. So it's a direct shot into your system, and one is usually dehydrated anyway. And so getting a liter of water into your body along with those compounds, you really notice it. Like you'll notice a big difference. So it's kind of expensive, but I think if you weigh it against how much money you're spending on flushing all those vitamins down the drain, for how bioavailable they are, I think it's a good value.
So is that something you do daily, weekly?
No, I try to do it like every other week, and then I'm also on the hunt for other compounds. Like NAD is another compound that cells produce. It's cell energy and rejuvenation. And I was going to do like a 4-week regime of 1,200 milligrams in a bag, but subsequently found out that doing precursors to that is going to be more effective. So it varies. So I'll definitely every other week do what's called a Myers cocktail. Mm-hmm. It's a variety of like vitamin C, B, and zinc. And I think that really bolsters my immune system. And then I also will have like at the end, they'll use a needle and push in glutathione, which is super important to your mitochondria. And the mitochondria are like the little cells or little batteries in your cells. So that's where your energy comes from. They secrete this stuff called ATP, and it's like it supercharges you. So keeping your mitochondria healthy, I think, is super important. And I found that taking glutathione orally, zero makes it through your digestive system. Having it put into your arm, for me, really makes a pretty big difference. Like I can definitely feel the energy from it. And then when I couple it with like cryotherapy, are you guys familiar with cryotherapy? It's awesome.
We've never done it. We've never done it. We've heard about it primarily from Tony Robbins and Tim Ferriss.
Oh, cryotherapy is really interesting. I mean, I found that it really lowers inflammation levels, but the thing that I really enjoy doing is doing a shot of glutathione and then doing cryo.
So can you elaborate on that for those who haven't heard about it?
A cryotherapy?
Yes.
Okay, so a cryo is where you go into a cylinder or a tank and your head is sticking out the top, and then it's flushed with liquid nitrogen, and you're actually for 2 or 3 minutes in this vessel at 230 to 260 degrees below zero.
Freezing for a couple minutes.
Just for 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah. 2 or 3 minutes. So I know it sounds a little crazy. And what happens is you start to notice some involuntary things about your body, which is just super fascinating to me. Like you'll start to get this shake that's completely involuntary. Like your body will just start to shake on its own. But then, you're out of it and then you feel completely exhilarated. Mm-hmm. So what happens is when you put your body into like a state of shock like that, it really triggers the fight or flight. And the fight or flight is when your mitochondria are just dumping ATP into your system. Mm-hmm. It also loosens up like lymph. So if you do have inflammation, it really reduces it because your body contracts and then opens up, and then you're able to flush a lot of the lymph out, which is pretty cool. So now that I've said that, the important part is I'm not a doctor, and I don't give medical advice. And if you were going to do something like this, I highly suggest, I demand that you talk to your physician first.
Absolutely. So where do you go for your cryo?
Oh, it's called PDX Cryo. So it's in Portland, Oregon. Okay. And yeah, they have like a package deal. And I think that, and my family lives in Colorado, and I can go back to Colorado, and there's actually several places that do IV vitamins and cryo. So if you just, go online, see if you can dig it up. It's not really cheap, but you don't need to do it every day. Like if you do it, once every couple of weeks, and I think it makes a difference.
So are you not administering your own in vitro vitamins then? You're doing that through the cryo clinic?
No, I actually have a naturopathic doctor who does compounding, and he's the one who does it. So I would, depending on, the state that you live in, if you're looking for somebody to give you IV therapy like that, I would research it and then, find out like who's doing their compounding and what kind of compounding they're doing. I think that people have to be involved in their own health because our healthcare system, I hate to say, is broken. And if you are not taking an active role in your own health, you are on a slippery slope. As you said before, tests are available to us. Like if you want to test your microbiome, there's places like ubiome.com that you can actually send in samples, stool samples, every month, and actually track. You can actually track the growth of your microbiome. And I actually did this like back in July. I caught an antibiotic-resistant upper respiratory infection, and that completely crashed my immune system. Like I couldn't get a cut. Like the smallest cut would all of a sudden get infected. So I tried to not take antibiotics because I haven't had them in over 20 years. But it was to the point where people are like, well, you have a choice. You can die or you can take antibiotics. Well, I took antibiotics. But beforehand, I'm like, wait, let me collect a stool sample, which really freaks people out. Like, look what's in my fridge. So I did that specifically because I wanted to see where what type of bacteria I had in my system before the antibiotics, and then right after the antibiotics. So I went from having a fairly healthy microbiome to zero. And so since after, yes, and I keep meaning to post the results, but I always worry that people will see them and be like, this guy collects his own poop, what's wrong with him? And it's
everything. It's like, I mentioned to you earlier that we garden, and it so correlates. The garden, a healthy garden begins with the soil, and a healthy begins with the gut. And very symbolically synchronistic in that regard. And so I think more and more people should be doing it, as distasteful and unpleasant.
100%.
It's very important, because if our gut is unhealthy, like so many of today's diseases could be prevented or cured if the gut attended.
And we have to get answers for our own body. We can't just be like, oh, well, they did a test and this is what happened with them. It's like, no, you have to figure out what's up with your own body.
Yeah. So I think that, it's really distressing. You see so many people struggling with illness and such, and that so often it could just simply be addressed with improving the diet and the microbiome, the gut health. Like even our allergies, for instance, and the allergic reactions to the soy from the buildup of that or whatever. We went through different kinds of allergy testings, various kinds, from the skin kind to blood to whatever. And none of our tests, both Devani and mine, showed that we are allergic to soy. And yet we see a very clear cause and effect between consuming it and a reaction. So you cannot even, and this is not the first, like same thing with my mom, same thing with, other people I've heard that have had tests that shows they're allergic to things that they don't seem to have a reaction to, or vice versa. So yes, we have to remember that when we go into the doctor, we might have 15 minutes with them, and yet we have all day with our body. So we really have to do our own intuitive and scientific research on ourselves. And I love that you do the testing, that you test on yourself first. I've always, for years, like when I'm trying to eat cream or something, I'll try one on one half of my face and one on the other. Yeah, I want to see it. I don't want to take the word of the marketers, to see.
Right. Yeah, I support that 100%. I think it would be interesting if you guys tested your microbiome, and if you guys would be able to sort of ascertain whether there was a overgrowth or undergrowth of particular bacteria that's involved in metabolizing soy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that, like food intolerances and food allergies, I really truly believe it's a function of your microbiome. And probably the worst thing that you can put into your system, obviously, is sugar. So because sugar will grow candida, and once you have an overgrowth of candida in your gut, it is so hard to get it out. I mean, those are the ultimate gangsters that will show up in your village. And that's I like to think of you have that. I like to think of the microbiome as a village. So it's like this village of this symbiotic colony of biological yeast, if you will. They're all living together in semi-harmony. But then once you start taking in massive amounts of sugar, right, then you get that particular bacteria that thrive on that, like the candida. And those are the gangsters that show up in your village, and soon your village is overrun with gangsters, and those gangsters are the ones that are going to trigger your food cravings. Right. So when you're like, I just can't stop eating sweets, and I'm just such a sweet tooth, it's it's not you as much as it's what's happening in you, which is you, because I have really sort of esoteric theories on what we really are, and I think we really are that group, that colony of bacteria. That's who we are. That's our spirit, our person, and that it communicates with the brain, and the brain's basically, gets us around, points us in the right direction. So yeah, I'm super interested in the microbiome, and I think that which is sort of uniquely positions me a bit, because a lot of the stuff that I create doesn't have sugar and doesn't feed the candida, doesn't feed any of these gangsters, and really will help. And there's a lot of fiber in them too, so it really does help feed that friendly flora that lives inside you.
Yeah, I love all of that. There's so much of value that you've shared for people to take away and to look into relative to their own bodies. It's really hard, when people are working full time and they come home to families, and as you know, the biohacking and attending to your health in that way, can take quite a bit of time, but it's the only body we've got.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that being collaborative and communicative with your, with your circle, your tribe is like critically important, because they have to be supporting you and what you do. And, I do hear from a lot of people, audience members, that will be like, well, you're just a single guy, so you can determine what you eat, but I've got kids who won't eat, who won't eat this and won't eat that, and they'll only eat French fries, and they got to have real ketchup. So, I mean, I sympathize, but I think if with a little more effort, you can create some really excellent workarounds that kids will like. That if you have a significant other or a partner, that they'll be like, wow, this is vegan and keto friendly. I'm shocked. And I think that's part of the joy when you like trick somebody and they're like, hey, wait, this doesn't have any sugar in it. How'd you do that? It's like magic.
It's funny how, like, these days it's like the foods that people consider are real foods are completely fake. It's like, that's not real food that you're eating, that you're calling real food. You know that, right?
Yeah, well, and thinking of that, so for our audience, you start to feel overwhelmed because they can't immediately go from where they are to, injecting supplement vitamins or whatever.
Right.
The most important thing, I think, from the Guy Gone Keto concept, as well as from our perspective, is to start with whole foods. So if you start with eating foods that are basically, as close to nature as possible, from the garden,
absolutely,
organic meats and that sort of thing, then, and just kind of, like you said, common sense, that will go a long way to helping people heal.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. I would say if you're going to go grocery shopping, shop the outside aisles, because that's where, your fresh produce is going to be. Also, as far as like eating meat, I think being super selective about the animal proteins that you consume and how you're consuming them is also super important. So I consider myself an omnivore, so I do eat animal proteins. But what I can tell you is that when I do, I consume the entire animal. Like, I won't throw away the bones, because I'll be using those bones to make bone broth. And I think that if you're not saving the bones, you're not eating the entire animal that has been harvested for you. And I think you should know where that animal was harvested, and if it was kept in a 4x4 pen its entire life, I think that's inhumane. But I think that if you know where your meat is coming from, and I think that if you consume the entire animal and you use the bones afterwards to make broth, I think that that's respectful. And I think that anything less than that is a huge disrespect. So I think that if you're going to eat meat, then be mindful of it, and be mindful of that sacrifice that was made, for you. And I get a lot of pushback on that. They're like, what are you, like, woo-woo or something? And it's like, no, I mean, that's common sense. Use the entire animal, use the bones, use every part of it, because it's like that animal had a life. And then, and that life was sacrificed so you could have, sustenance. So respect that.
Yeah. That's how it originally was anyway. It's not like Paleolithic man was randomly just killing whatever it wanted for a snack.
Right.
Whatever. It was like they were using the entire animal for what they needed.
And it was a mutually respectful survival.
Yeah. And it was clothing to food. It's like this, and there was this recognition, and probably partly because they had to go out themselves.
Yes.
To the process.
100%. They are intimate with the process of harvesting that animal. And I think that once you start looking at like big box grocery stores where you just go and it's just, you know, aisles of meat, you know, that it's just in a package and it's really sanitized, then it ceases to become an animal, and and now just becomes another commodity that you're picking up off of the off of the shelf. I think that because I grew up on a ranch, and so I've seen how an animal is harvested, and when you're involved in that process and you're intimate with that process, it makes you think twice about wasting. It also makes you think twice about where that came from. And I'm also an avid fly fisherman, and you know, I might keep one fish every couple years. I feel like I have an agreement with them that they're inviting me to play in their stream. Part of it is I will release them so they can go on with their lives. But when I have kept the fish, it's like a deep sense of honor for me. And I mean, I will consume the whole thing and reflect on where I actually got that fish. So when you're not intimate with your food, you know, when you aren't touching it, when you're not involved in that process, a lot of that reverence and regard just fades away. So I would say get involved in it. Go visit a rendering factory, you know, where they're processing beef or poultry, and you can see how horrible that is, and shift your intention and shift your focus to something that's more sustainable, and just better for the entire earth.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
Yeah, and we have not, being vegetarians, so we're not doing the animal side of it, but we do the same thing with harvest from our garden. You know, it's like we bring the vegetables in, and like you hold them and you appreciate them in a different
Yeah.
Regardless of whether, so if you don't have a garden, you're not able to hunt your own food or whatever, what you can at the very least do, be conscious of where you're buying things, buy things that are, buy less at higher quality than more at lower quality. And then I think that
and get involved with local farmers markets and stuff too.
Absolutely.
That's a great place to start if you're completely overwhelmed of where do I even begin?
That's right.
People who grow locally, and it's not necessarily always organic, just because they grow local, but you do get involved with the growers and the process and all of that.
And they have put their energy into the growing of it as well. And so I think that, part of your sharing sums up for me the concept of reverence. Reverence for the planet, reverence for life, reverence for ourselves and our body and the one body that we have, and to care for that. Is there any other parting comments you would like to share with our audience in general, Thom?
I got nothing. I mean, everything you just said, I think you summed it all up. It's reverence. It's reverence and being present, and setting intention. And I think that the cleaner we can eat, the better. And make sure that you eat what you buy, because I was reading that over 25% of all of the food in the United States is actually thrown away. And it's like, if you buy something, eat it. Don't throw it away. But I mean, I think that was beautifully summarized. Reverence.
Okay, good. Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, Thom, there's still so much more we could talk with you about, but thank you for sharing. I think we kind of covered a wide-ranging topics, basically. And so we'll link to your sites. We'll link to thomking.com, THOM. We'll link to Guy Gone Keto as well with the site, and hopefully people will check out your products. By the way, have you been on the Ben Greenfield podcast?
I haven't. I don't know if that's on my queue or not, but I do follow him. So that will be fun.
You guys will geek out together. So he's a character, and he's full on deep into it like you are. So I look forward to hearing that when that happens. But again, thank you so much for spending the afternoon, spending this time with us and sharing your story and your passion.
Oh, thank you so much. It was, it's such a pleasure and an honor to get to talk with you guys. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.